Jordan Peterson was asked why so many big-name people are becoming Christian nowadays, and Peterson named some names, including Joe Rogan, and his answer as to why was really good. Watch this 7-minute clip that I took from this about 3-hour interview, and then I'll finish with something really important that people are beginning to notice about this way of life that we call Christianity.
Why do you think it is that it seems like more bigger name folks are becoming Christian? Or to some degree or another, like Candace Owens and... Who's that? Rod Schneider, your bride.
Yeah, Ian Hersey Lee, Neil Ferguson, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, Douglas Murray.
Joe Rogan, we do know Joe Rogan.
Yeah, well, Joe's already, he's got a foot in the camp.
He's a lot less disparaging of Christianity than he once was, which we all really appreciate. Thank you,
well,
Joe.
Joe figured it out. Yeah. Because here's why. Here's the answer to that. Sacrifice is the basis of the community.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the...
Is it? What does that mean?
Well, of course it is. Well, it's all about you.
Right, no.
Well, then you're not in a community.
Right.
Right? Then you're a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about you. You don't have a community. So what do you do to join a community? You sacrifice. Obviously.
Yeah.
What? How about everything? Well, that's the Christian offer. Is that the basis of community? Well, why do we put the crucifix at the center of our communities?
Okay.
Because we know that voluntary self-sacrifice is the basis of the stable psyche and state. We know that. Even though we don't know, we know it. That's why we worship it. It's like, well, what did Christ do? Took the sins of the world upon himself and offered everything. Well, is that the basis of community? Yeah, it's your responsibility, buddy.
So
Get at it.
So is the idea that as people kind of understand this and begin to live this way, they become a lot more open to the Christian message and find it more persuasive? Is that what's happening?
Well, I think they are increasingly apprehensive about the weakness of the alternative. And this is true. Dawkins called himself a cultural Christian like 2 weeks ago. Well, why? Well, how about because he's terrified of the Islamic fundamentalists?
Yes.
How about that?
Yes.
So afraid that he won't speak against them in public. Right, well, there's something to think about. Mm-hmm. Oh, you mean the Christians had something right? I guess so. What? Exactly. Oh, well, they had something right. It's like, yeah, they had something right. What is it exactly that they had right? Principle of voluntary self-sacrifice. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's the central motif. Why else? Well, the humanists aren't doing such a great job, are they? They seem to fall into the camp of hedonism or totalitarianism at the drop of a bloody hat. And that's happened. It's happening now. It sweeps the campuses. They're the admirers of Hamas. Brutal.
Yeah.
The sweep of hedonistic pride. The clarion call of the Marxists. It's like, there's the humanism for you.
But see, Dawkins would say even a blind hog is going to find an acorn occasionally. And so we
hey
shouldn't
man,
be
he's the one
surprised
who
that-
called himself a cultural Christian.
Yeah, you're not putting that on him. But his point is, it's false. It's false.
Yeah,
Just
whatever.
accept the good that came from it, like the things you're talking
You
about.
can't do that. No, that's the thing is that's not. It isn't. Judeo-Christian doctrine is not a scientific hypothesis. The people who came up with the stories weren't scientists 3,000 years ago. It's not a scientific theory. What is it? It's a story. We see the world through a story.
Yeah.
We inhabit a story. What's the story? The principle of voluntary self-sacrifice reflects the fundamental spirit of being itself.
Why can't it be a story and there be no historical Jesus? Like, why can't it just be a made-up story that's really helpful?
The simplest explanation for Christ involves his historicity. I think that's just a non-starter. It's just simplest to assume that he existed. Partly, too, because the gospel story is insanely complicated. It's insanely... I'll tell you a story. You tell me if you think someone could have thought this up.
All right.
Okay. When Moses is leading the Israelites through the desert, near the end of the story, they get all bitchy and whiny and pining for the tyranny and complaining about Moses and faithless about God and hopeless about the promised land. And, they're a whiny pack of slavish hedonists.
Okay.
And so they have a little fit like they always do.
Yeah.
And God's pretty tired of their bitching and whining. And so he sends a bunch of poisonous snakes in there to bite them. And you think, well, that's a hell of a thing for a good God to do.
If I did that to my kids, that'd be...
Yeah, well, it's like, no, it's absolutely straightforward. If you're in a rough situation and you start pining for the tyranny and calling yourself a victim and bitching about everything and losing your faith in forward movement, things are going to get a hell of a lot worse. Right. So that's the snakes. So you can blame that on God if you want, but that's not very smart. So it's like, if you weren't such a, slavish weasel, ungrateful weasel, the snakes wouldn't be there. Okay, so the Israelites are getting bitten up pretty good, and they get a little bit on the repenting side, but mostly it's just pragmatism. And they go to Moses and they say, well, we hear you've got a pipeline to God. And, there's a lot of snakes and we're not very happy about that. And so maybe you could ask God if you just call off the snakes. And Moses says, I'll see what I can do. And so he goes and has a chat with God. And God says, yeah, I don't think I'll call those snakes off. Although I could, because
I'm God.
Well, I put them there.
You could totally do.
And you could imagine a story where the Israelites repent.
Yeah.
They go to Moses. Moses has a chat with God, and the snakes go away.
Right.
That's not what happens.
Right.
Something really weird happens instead. It's really weird. God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take all the bronze that the Israelites have with them, and I want you to cast a staff.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's the staff of Moses' tradition, right? That's the staff that turns into the serpent that devours all other serpents. Yeah. That's the pole at the center of the world. That's the cosmic axis that unites earth and heaven. It's all of that. It's the tree of life, right? It's all of that. Make a staff. That's the staff Moses wields. That's what gives him his authority, right? That's the crook that guides the sheep, right? It's the magic wand of the wizard. It's all of that. It's the pole that the serpent of Asclepius wraps itself around. It's the symbol of healing itself, right? It's all of that. This is no trivial story. Make a staff of bronze, wrap a serpent around it, and then bring all the Israelites to look at it. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we know what that means from a psychotherapeutic perspective. Yeah. It's a pharmacon. A little of the poison that kills you will redeem you. Look upon that which you fear and grow. Right? That's the definition of growth. That's how you learn. You go out on the edge and you look at something poisonous and you get stronger. Right? And so God thinks, well, I'm not going to get rid of the snakes, but I'll make the Israelites stronger. And you asked why we have a challenge in front of it. It's like, we're here to become stronger. We're not here to be protected. And you get stronger in proportion to your willingness to look at what terrifies you. Okay, so that's fine. So the Israelites go look at the serpent, and the snakes can't poison them. So that's cool, but that's not what's really cool, although that's enough. That's Asclepius. That's a major league bringing together of ideas, a massive bringing together of ideas. It's deep beyond anything I've ever seen represented in the literary realm. And so you can say, well, that's the opium of the people or the figment of the imagination. It's like, yeah, you come up with something like that. Just try it.
There is something very important about Christianity that people are beginning to notice. And it is this that is actually starting to win people over. It works. It's a way of life that produces peaceful, stable, and fulfilled individuals and societies. We are identified by the word Christian. However, that term was originally assigned to us by the Romans and Jews at the time right after Christ was crucified. It is not a name that we actually gave to ourselves. The original followers of Christ simply called it the way. And that is much more fitting and hits on the point that I want to make here. We are not talking about some arbitrary set of rules for medieval people. We are talking about the way that leads to life in full for human beings. In fact, for all living things. Christ is the logos, the principle through which all creation is ordered and governed. There is a cosmic order, and proper alignment with that order produces ordered, stable, and thriving living things. Think of it this way. The trees are Christian because they are properly aligned with that which ordered and created all things. They serve their role and purpose assigned by the Creator, no questions asked, and they thrive and contribute to life by doing so. Human beings have the choice to live aligned or not. This is the unique condition of humanity. We have all of these prayers, rituals, activities, sacraments that we participate in because they help us remain aligned with this order, truth, and reality. They help keep us on the path, on the way that leads to life, to heaven, to God, to Christ. We use words for all of these things, but ultimately what it comes down to is there is one way that leads to life in full for human beings. It has simply just been categorized and is identified by the word Christianity, but nonetheless, it is the universal way to be, to act and live that produces life. And people are once again taking notice.